Hi all. This module builds on the previous one to talk about challenges that groups face when making decisions. As I said previously, groups make a lot of decisions, and decision-making processes seem very mundane. They're part of our everyday life in groups, whether they're from small decisions to really major decisions that have massive impact on people's lives. Decision-making is something that groups do a lot, right? So, if you were optimistic, you might think, well, this means that we have all this practice and we're really good at it. And to some extent, that's true. But we also know that we get decision fatigue, right? And there are lots of groups that don't make good decisions at all, or that say that they're doing certain types of decision making, like seeking input or whatever, but they're actually not, and they've already made a choice and they're just defending that decision after the fact. So this module, we really look at why is it that groups have a hard time making decisions? What are these sort of challenges to effective and ethical decision making? And how can we be better group members to try to mitigate or prevent these challenges in our own groups? So I want to talk about three different types of reasons, or three different types of challenges that groups face. The first is just external factors. Like we've talked about the way that all groups are embedded in some sort of context and connected to other groups, and like the bona fide group perspective gives us a good sense of what that is like, and you can think about that from your own experience. Groups are never just an island. They're embedded in some larger system or an organization or community or something like this, right? So often we have external factors that influence the way that we make decisions. There might be time pressure, like we've got a deadline. There might be some sort of crisis, right? There's time pressure, there's situation changes. We think something is happening, but then something big changes in the community and suddenly the ground has shifted under us and what we thought we were doing isn't what we actually need to be doing, and so we have to pivot and make a different kind of decision or kind of throw all our work out the window and start over, right? Like you can think about situations you may have been in where something like that has happened. I think this happens in community situations, in government. Sometimes it happens in organizations, especially if there's some sort of change or a crisis. And then sometimes our decisions are influenced from powerful forces outside of our group, like maybe the CEO of a company makes a declaration about new priorities and then that impacts what we're doing in our group, or maybe somebody has a powerful interest in certain decisions and they put pressure or lobby kind of the group for making particular types of decisions. So that context matters a lot, and there are pressures from the outside that can shape the way that decisions are made, and often that creates some challenges. The other two types of challenges, I think it's easiest to organize them into sort of task communication issues and relational communication issues, right? We've talked about task and relational communication. So some of the sort of task-oriented things that might influence the way that groups make decisions that might create challenges are, first, you might have incomplete or bad information. This happens a lot in groups. Either we rely on experts to provide us information and we don't double check our sources. We only seek out information that confirms what we already believe. We do a not very thorough approach to sort of analyzing the information that we have, right? So there's all sorts of information problems that can create challenges for good group decision making, because how do you make a good decision if you don't have good information? Or this sort of well, we have one source that says one thing and another that says the other, so I guess nobody can know, right? And getting groups to move past that sort of initial well, who knows, we have no way of analyzing this information, that can be a huge challenge depending on what kind of group you're in. There's also this idea that you could have, you could be trying to use the wrong process, right? In a previous module, I talked about how there's lots of different communication processes for decision making, and then sometimes groups just don't have awareness of those different processes, and they might just use a not very well designed process. Like one thing I've seen is a problem appears and they think, oh, we have to make a decision. And who's got ideas? And they shout out a couple ideas and they go, oh, I like this idea. Who likes this one? And people raise their hand. They're like, great, we'll do that, right? Clearly that's a very cursory, surface level, kind of bad way to make a decision, right? Especially if it's a complex decision. So thinking about, do we have the well-designed process? Sometimes another task thing, responding to time pressure, we might make decisions too quickly and not really take the time that we need, or we might even galvanize around ideas that support our previously held position and kind of refuse to learn, refuse to be influenced, refuse to change our minds, right? And this is sometimes in the literature referred to as polarization, idea polarization, or extreme polarization in groups where we just kind of already know the answer that we want and we just kind of work toward that. So all of those are like, I think of them as sort of task related, right? They're kind of analytic. But another huge set of issues that prevent groups from making good decisions or make challenges for groups making decisions have to do with relational communication, right? So it's easy to think about, oh, we're just making a decision, so this is just about the task, and that's what we have to pay attention to. But it's crucial to remember that task and relational communication are intertwined, right? So you can't just pretend like the relationships aren't there or that they don't matter. It's really important, if you want to have good decisions, to be making these decisions in a supportive climate where you have positive relationships. So I encourage you to be mindful of things like the power dynamics in your group and who has social influence, who's listened to and who isn't listened to. What's the impact of the sort of relational climate on your decision process? Are there kind of pre-existing subgroups or cliques? Are there fault lines related to diversity? Are there differences in speaking styles that mean that some voices are really taken seriously and others are not? These are some really important questions to be asking yourself in your group if you want to not only just have inclusive group climate, but also make decisions in a way that takes various positions and kind of experiences into account, right? So being mindful of those kind of relational issues is important. Another set of relational communication issues have to do with kind of feeling pressured to agree. And there's a number of research areas on like groupthink or sort of false consensus that look at what happens when maybe it's a powerful leader who says, you know, this is what I think we should do, and everybody kind of piles on, or it's a group that's developed this norm of, thinking that, agreeing and being unanimous is more important than anything else. Those are things that can really be damaging. So if you're in a group that has that, you'll see it happen, because when somebody says a dissenting position, like, I'm not sure that's a good idea, or I don't think I can, go along with this because I have concerns. If the group's response is like, oh, come on, it'll be fine. You're such a worrywart. No, we don't have to worry about that. It'll be okay. That's a good sign that the pressure to agree and be unanimous is more important to your group than taking all voices into consideration and looking at things from different angles. And that's really dangerous. That can be a symptom of kind of groupthink or false consensus that can lead to really disastrous decisions. And then finally, sometimes a challenge can be if the group doesn't have a sense of collective responsibility. So sometimes you can be in a group and think like, well, I'm just participating in this, but like, whatever, it's not really on my shoulders. Somebody else has to deal with it in the end. So, whatever, and they don't take it as seriously. But building a sense of collective responsibility or ownership over the decision process and over the outcome can help mitigate some of that. So, as you see, there's challenges from sort of the outside, there's task-related challenges, there's relational-related challenges that can all make group decision-making really, really difficult. So the readings this week have some examples of groups facing these decision-making challenges and also offer some suggestions of how to help avoid the pitfalls or address them if you see them happening in your groups. I hope this stuff is useful for you as you think about your own group interactions. And as always, I look forward to hearing what you think about this material and reading your reflections this week.